Hello, this is Liz Lawless, your host for Wild West Diversity, where we tell the rarely and untold stories of multicultural contributions to the settling of the American Wild West. Each Thursday at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time, we'll be sharing a historical legend and a living legend. Someone from history and someone living that Western lifestyle today, keeping it alive for the future generation. We hope you'll join us on Thursday. If not, we'll see you on the trail. Hello, this is Liz Lawless, your host for Wild West Diversity, and this is season 2. I can't believe it. I can't believe we've got a whole year under our belt here at Wild West Diversity live stream and podcasting. And so this is season 2, episode 47. And today we're going to be talking about the Fort Worth Stock Show and Rodeo. It starts this weekend, actually tomorrow, and runs through February. And so this is a huge deal. It's one of the very first stock shows. It kicks off the season of the year for the rodeo, for ProRodeo professionals. And over the years, they have really added a lot of cultural aspect to this to make the rodeo and the stock show would want to come to. And so I would recommend that you put it on your trip, on your schedule. This is the oldest indoor rodeo in the world. They were established in 1896. So the first rodeo indoors, 1896, over 127 years ago. So this is the 127th year, and pretty much had a rodeo every year except 1 year during the war and 1 year during COVID. But other than that, the rodeo's been happening annually every year at the first, second, fourth week of January. Started out with just a couple of days, then grew to a week, then grew to 2 weeks, then grew to 3 weeks. So now it runs from the middle of January into the 1st of February. So I just wanted to share a little history because this is so interesting. There's so many things that happened over there over the years that I think people would be interested in, that you might, as a Western enthusiast, might want to know. So, as we mentioned, 1896, the first stock show takes place in March on the banks of Marine Creek in North Fort Worth. Purebred cattle such as Shorthorns and Herefords were exhibited. The second show, held October 12th through 13th, coincided with the National Livestock Exchange Convention. And so the very first stock show parade was held on October 12th. And so as we went down, in 1898, the local merchants began to exhibit. So they immediately started an exposition or expo area for local businesses. They adopted the name Texas Fat Stock Show in 1901. And then you see here the picture of the formal openings at the Armour and Swift packing plants in North Fort Worth. They coincided with a stock show. And so that was one of the very first sponsors too there. And so, and then one of our favorite things, of course, to talk about is in 1904, Bill Pickett, the father of bulldogging, the first African American, or the only African American, I should say, to create a rodeo event, was Bill Pickett. Bill was from Taylor, Texas, just down the road a piece here, and from Dallas, Fort Worth area, from the Fort Worth Stock Show. And Bill demonstrated the bulldogging at the stock show. And it was just an act at that point. It wasn't an event. It was an act, and it became the modern rodeo event that we call today steer wrestling. In the early years, it was kind of called bulldogging because basically what happened is Bill had watched the dogs go in and pull the steers out of the thicket, out of the cactus, out of the hard places and bushes and strings where horses really couldn't get to, and difficult for men to get to too. So they would send the dogs in. And so when a steer got loose in the crowd at a show in Madison Square Garden, Bill rode up, jumped off, grabbed that steer by the horns, bit it on the lip, and drug it back into the arena. And everybody thought it was a part of the show. But it really wasn't. So it did become a part of the show after that. And so then we had the roundup of in 1905, a ranch work was demonstrated, and so they added that. The first admission in 1907 was 25 cents. They organized the Stock Show Association, and they had their official four-horse show was held. And so it was set over there at the Northside Coliseum. And then later on, they moved, and we'll talk about that as we go. But basically, lots of interesting stuff going on. The Northside Coliseum seats about 2,000 people, I think. And like you say, it was an indoor rodeo, and that was the first of its kind. Most rodeos were outside. The great rodeos we know about, Cheyenne, Pendleton, Calgary, all of those rodeos are outdoor rodeos. So in 1909, for the first time, the show runs concurrently with the Texas Cattle Raisers Association annual meeting. And the parade it goes on, and for the first time, 40 Comanche and Kiowa Braves, led by Chief Quanah Parker, on March 19 was held. And that was the very first and the very last time that prize show bulls were featured in the parade. They used to have the bulls parade through the streets with the rest of the contestants and the entertainers, but that was the last time in 1909. And here we see this picture. We had the stock show president, Burt Burnett, and President Roosevelt. So President Roosevelt, Theodore Roosevelt, came in 1911. He was the former president, and he was a guest of honor there. So like you say, presidents and celebrities, all kinds of people have participated and been here at the Fort Worth Stock Show and Rodeo. In 1916, the Miller Brothers 101 Ranch brought their Wild West show, and that's who Bill Pickett worked for. Bill grew up here in Taylor, Texas with his brother. They had some horse training for a while, and then he went to work for the 101 Ranch in Oklahoma. And so they brought in their famous Wild West show as entertainment. That was in 1916. And then in 1918, the world's original indoor rodeo was added as strictly a contest with events including ladies bucking broncos, junior steer wrestling, riding, men's steer riding, and then the stock show adopts the Southwestern Exposition and Fat Stock Show as the official name. And so you could see there that was the original building there, inside the original building in 1918. And then all along with the stock show, the reason it was called the Fat Stock Show was because we had these forerunners of basically the 4-H clubs that sprang up around the country that fostered the youth learning about livestock production and exhibiting. And so they would have their animals that they would work with all year long. And that's what you see here. These are the early day youth exhibitors. And you can tell by their clothing, this was 1919. So this was almost 100 years ago. And so these young people would grow and take care of these calves and cattle and goats and sheep later on, but especially cattle. And they would take care of these calves, and then they would bring these calves to the show, and then they would get paid money for these, the best of show, and people could auction and pay money to take these calves home. And that's what you're seeing there. And then one of my favorite things in 1920, Tad Lucas, cowgirl, Tad Lucas, became one of the cowgirls by riding a Brahma bull in the stock show event lineup. So that's a picture there of Tad. And what's really fun for me is I know her granddaughter, Rilo Sano. We used to work together, and Sano Riley, I'm sorry, but we used to work together in the early days when I was in the communication business. And she worked for EDS, but Tad was her grandmother. And so that was really fun to learn and to know somebody that was related to somebody so famous, because in cowboy and cowgirl circles, if you say Tad Lucas, everybody knows who you're talking about. So 1925, we're going down here, and there were exciting things happening every year, but I'm just trying to give you some of the highlights. So in 1925, the stock show becomes the place where guests make a fashion statement. That's when you saw some of the first high hats and the crowned wide brim felt hats and the high heeled boots and split riding skirts. So fashion was a big thing, and it was the first automobile exhibit opened at the stock show too in 1925. So um, and then in 1932, they had the first live broadcast of a rodeo on the NBC network through the Amon Carter Fort Worth affiliate WBAP. And that WBAP was really fun for me. I never knew what that meant. And it meant we bring a program. So WBAP, it's a radio station here in the Dallas Fort Worth area that's been here, like I say, since 1932 and before that even. And they have always been great friends of the rodeo. And so they were the very first live broadcast in 1932. And then you can see there on the screen the Will Rogers Coliseum. But basically in 1943, the stock show was canceled due to World War II. So that was the only year in the early years when the stock show did not happen. But in 1944, they built this beautiful new building. And so the stock show moved to the Will Rogers Memorial Center. And that's what you're looking at there with this beautiful tower. Livestock, they were exhibited in large tents up until 1948. And then Gene Autry became the first entertainer to appear at the rodeo. And there were special late night rodeo performances that were held for the benefit of swing employees who were building planes for the war effort at local assembly plants, aircraft assembly plants. And so they did special shows for that. And in 1946, the stock show celebrated its golden anniversary, and W.R. Billy Bob Wyatt became president of the stock show, serving until his death in 1977. And if you come to Fort Worth, one of the big places you have to go is Billy Bob's. That's the dance hall. That's the big dance hall down in the Fort Worth north side area of town. So that's a highlight for tourists. If you come to Fort Worth, that's where you want to be. And there we see again one of these calves that was the champion calf, voted the best of best there, and he's winning the trophy. And that is Bobby Sell, and he had the grand champion for that year. And so in 1958, the stock show's rodeo received the complete live televised coverage. And looky here, if you look really closely at that picture, the guest stars were Roy Rogers and Dale Evans. They were hosts on NBC TV with George Gabby Hayes, who was one of the Sons of the Pioneers. And so if you know anything about movie history and cowboy movie history and singing cowboys, Roy Rogers, Dale Evans they were the big stars in the early 60s. And so they were here kicking off the stock show in 1958. And so then they started winning the money. So Guy Weeks wins $4,000 in the rough stock and the timed tie down roping event. So lots of fun things going on there. I really wanted to share that in 1962, Ernest Bud Bramwell became the first African American to earn a Fort Worth Stock Show rodeo title by winning the steer wrestling. And Bud was Cleo Hearn. We've talked about our founder of Cowboys of Color Rodeos. Well, Bud was Cleo's a partner. He was actually the president of the Black Cowboy Association that took those 100 cowboys to Harlem in 1971. Bud's still living. He lives up in Oklahoma. So he has the honor of being the first African American to win a steer wrestling championship. And then our fun things here on the screen, always a big kid at the show. This was Zippy in 1965. Zippy the monkey and his Scottish sheepdog, they made their first appearance. They were trained by a local man named Tommy Lucia, and they were the crowd favorite, of course, every year. And then later on, Whiplash. There was a second monkey when after Zippy passed. Whiplash there, you can see in the color photos, like you say, he comes along later on, and he entertains the crowds, and very astonishing what animals can do with people that they love and for people that they love. So 1977, we're just moving along here. So Billy Bob White dies, and his son J.R. Bob White Jr. becomes the stock show six. Then is hired as the announcer for the rodeo performances. So if you hear any commercial or any voice during the rodeo, that's Bob Tallman. Bob's been working since 1977, and he's still there today. He's still the announcer for the rodeo. And very fun. And that's a really fun thing. And Bob's a great guy. And he loves rodeo too. And then in 1979, if you're from this area, the Texas, Oklahoma area, you know that Neil Gay was the owner of the Mesquite Rodeo. And Neil Gay is hired in 1979 to bring the stock to the show. So there's a stock contractor. And you've seen those stock contractors on our show. If you go back in the archives, you can find Martinez Bulls, where we had a conversation with the Martinez and with Eddie Martinez and his family's bull stock contracting company. So that's a really fun thing that the Rafter G, the Gay family, they provided stock for the rodeo since 1979, and they still provide that stock today. Neil passed away this past year, but his sons are carrying on that tradition, and so they're there. And so in 1987, there's our Mr. Hearn, Cleo Hearn on the screen there. But one of Cleo's compadres, one of his rodeo pals, was a gentleman named Sylvester Mayfield. They live over in Clovis, New Mexico. And Sylvester was the first African-American rodeo standout. He won the tie-down calf roping event in 1987, and 33 years later, his son, Shad Mayfield, who came up through our Cowboys of Color Rodeo program and who is now a professional cowboy with the PRCA, Shad competed at the ProRodeo tournament and went on to win the PRCA World Champion tie-down roping in 2021. His daughter and their sister, and Shad's sister, Shelby Mayfield, she competes at Cowboys of Color Rodeos and is going to college, but she'll be probably pursuing that professional barrel racing here shortly. And so there it is. And so we're moving down through the years here. There's so many things going on. In the 2000, we're moving in there. 2003 is when the stock show added the Bulls Night Out. That's an extreme PRCA bull riding competition. They started the very first exhibition Charro Mexicana, which was basically the vaqueros and escaramuzas and dancers and the wonderful Diaz family, which we expect to have here on the show this first quarter. But they started in 2003. And then it became known as the Best of Mexico Celebration in 2004. So, Jerry is a fifth generation Charro, and now his son's coming along. And here we see, this is the Circle L5. This is our black drill team that performs at the Cowboys of Color Rodeo. And in 2010, the Cowboys of Color Rodeo debuts at the Fort Worth Stock Show and Rodeo. And as we talked about, our rodeo highlights the contributions of African Americans, Hispanic, Native Americans, and Anglos to the settling of the American Wild West that many history books failed to do. And so it tells that history and heritage of these multicultural communities. Brad Barnes is elected president after Bob White passes away. And then, the money is really beginning to grow. It's grown dramatically. So the grand champion breaks the $200,000 mark. And so the grand champion was paid over $200,000 for this calf that he raised. And Tommy Cook is one of our competitors for Cowboys of Color Rodeos. As you can see, he's a steer wrestler, so he's bringing that steer down. And steer wrestling is not for the faint of heart. I've heard Kevin Woodson, our rodeo announcer, who y'all have heard on this show before. He said steer wrestling is kind of like riding on the back of a truck and jumping off and grabbing a mailbox. And so you got to be real careful, because they do have steers, and you can get hurt doing this. And like you say, it's something you need to practice. We've talked with Charles Hearn, our man on the ranch, about why practice is so important. And you need to be practicing before you go out. You don't just go out and jump into a rodeo event. I mean, you have to start somewhere, but and there are junior events and places where you can do that, but not for the faint of heart, like you say. And so rodeo is one of the only sports where, like you say, you have to pay to play. So all these years up until 2019, the stock show was held at the Will Rogers Memorial Coliseum with the tower there that we saw earlier in the day. But in 2020, we moved to this new arena. This is the new Dickies Arena. It debuted the stock show's new home for the rodeo. The art is masterful. The Art Deco masterpiece was designed and built to host a variety of entertainment events throughout the year. But the Fort Worth Stock Show ProRodeo tournament is what kicks things off. And it debuted an exciting tournament style rodeo, providing spectators an easy to follow and exciting format, and $1.2 million in prize money. So when these competitors, when these cowboys and cowgirls come to the Fort Worth Stock Show, they're coming to win the money. Okay, they're coming to compete, and they're coming to win. And there's a lot of money on the line. It's one of the very first rodeos that kicks off the season. And if you can start off well at Fort Worth, and you can win some money at Fort Worth, it really helps your confidence and keeps that up. And the grand champion steer was a Hereford named Cupid Shuffle, of all things, and exhibited by Ryder Day of Meadow, Texas. And it sold for a record-smashing $300,000, this calf. And that this young person, trained and took care of and helped feed and water and grow. And so there are thousands and thousands of dollars given away every year in scholarships to these young people who participate in these 4-H programs, and FFA, which is Future Farmers of America. In Texas, we still have a lot of small towns, and so kids come from all over the country, all over Texas to the state, to bring their animals. There are show barns during the rodeo. Not only is the rodeo going on, but there's a lot of horse events, equestrian events are going on in the other barn areas. There's a midway that was added years ago. We didn't mention the date on that, but they've had the midway, so you can come and basically spend the day with your family, ride the rides, go through the exhibits, go to the exposition area where businesses are selling Western related items. That might be furniture, it might be clothing, it might be buckles, it might be things for the animals, things for your farm or your ranch. Just all kinds of things are going on. So this is a very exciting time. It's 3 weeks, like we talked about. It starts tomorrow. No, I'm sorry, Friday. Starts the 13th, I think, January 13th through February 4th. And so basically, on Friday and Saturday, you'll have the Ranch Rodeo, which is the best of the West. And so the ranches that still have ranch hands here in Texas, they come and compete against each other. And they win prizes on Friday. It's the Mexican rodeo we talked about, put on by the Diaz family. The celebration of Mexico is a great historical and heritage and masterful horse training and masterful horsemanship. The skills that you'll see there. We'll be there with our Cowboys of Color Rodeo in honor of Martin Luther King, and so that is our rodeo that kicks off our season for us for Cowboys of Color Rodeos. And so we'll be there on Monday for a matinee at 2 o'clock. You might check and see if tickets are available, but they sell out every year. This new Dickies arena that we showed you, we went from 65 seats and we still sell out. So people come, it's kind of like the state fair. The people from all over the world and certainly all over the state come to Fort Worth in January to the Fort Worth Stock Show. It's a time for people to take vacations, for families to take a weekend and come to Fort Worth, or to come during the day and see all these wonderful exhibits that basically promote Western lifestyle and livestock and the animals that are so important to farming and ranching, and that have been a part of this country and been not only, like you say, an emotional attachment that we have to these animals, but they're also a huge economic impact to that. I basically do a talk called Black Cowboys Yesterday and Today, and it's the economic impact of Black Cowboys. And so in the old days, it was right after the Civil War, there were a lot of cattle that got loose and that were just left loose while people went off to war and people went to fight in the war, and there was nobody to take care of the animals. And so a huge herd of longhorns and other cattle grew up in Texas. And so during the couple of years of the war, and after that, that's when the cattle drives came in. And so cowboys in the early days were impact through cattle drives. They rounded up these cattle and they drove these cattle up to markets in the north, at Kansas and Chicago, and then eventually to New York as a food source. And so today, the economic impact is coming through rodeos, because a rodeo like Fort Worth, it's there for 3 weeks, bringing people in, people staying in hotels, people eating at restaurants, people shopping, driving, paying, getting gas. I mean, it's a huge economic impact on a community, and it's in the millions of dollars now. I mean, a small rodeo like our rodeo, Cowboys of Color, we're only there one day. But even our rodeo is a couple $100,000 of impact. When you bring in 200 people from out of town, cowboys and cowgirls and their families, they're going to spend their money locally in the local community, and that's going to help the local economic community. And so today, it's about rodeo. Rodeo is the big impact, economic impact on many communities. Cheyenne, the week that the rodeo goes on up in Cheyenne in July, that's the biggest week of the year. You know, it's a small community, I guess. I don't know how many they have now, but originally I think they had, 5, 10, 20,000 people. And all of a sudden there's 200,000 or 300,000 people there for the Cheyenne rodeo. Pendleton, same. Calgary, the same. Even though the Calgary is a bigger community, during those days of the rodeo, it's a huge economic impact to the community. And the big rodeo, the PRCA, which is the Professional Rodeo Cowboy Association, has their big rodeo the first 10 days of December in Las Vegas. And those 10 days in Las Vegas create millions of dollars in revenue for the hotels, for the tourism industry, for the casinos, for the restaurants, for the entertainment, for the shows. I mean, all of that is going on. There's an expo there where there's a lot of Western businesses that come and participate during that year and sell their products to all the people attending the rodeos. So rodeo's a big thing. And even though it's not big as football, maybe it's not as big as basketball and baseball, but from a Western's perspective, it's a huge, a big deal. And so the very first indoor rodeo that's been around for 127 years starts this weekend. I encourage Texas area, certainly that you should put that on your list. If you live somewhere else, you should plan to come, plan a trip and come to Fort Worth and experience the cowboy and Western lifestyle in a way that you might not experience in other communities, for sure, because Basically, that's where a lot in the north side is where they had the cattle pens, and that's where they drove the cattle to there, and then they drove them north up the Chisholm Trail, up the Goodnight Loving Trail. Those are historical things that we've talked about in the past. So if you want to go back and watch our videos, you can do that on our YouTube channel at Wild West Diversity. Subscribe, punch that red button and subscribe. See our other 46 episodes. I can't believe this is the 47th episode. Very excited about that, to come into our second season. And we're going to have some great shows coming up. So we'll be talking with Geneva. She's a singer. She loves to sing the national anthem at rodeos, and she's an African-American singer. Sings not only that, but country music and other things. We'll have the Diaz family, like we talked about, talking about the Mexican heritage, and there are 5-6 generations of charros. And so we hope you'll come back and see us on Thursday. We're here every Thursday at 5 p.m. If not, we'll see you on the trail. This has been Liz Lawless, your host for Wild West Diversity, with episode 47. Hello, this is Liz Lawless, your host for Wild West Diversity, where we tell the rarely and untold stories of multicultural contributions to the settling of the American Wild West. Each Thursday at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time, we'll be sharing a historical legend and a living legend. Someone from history and someone living that Western lifestyle today, keeping it alive for the future generation. We hope you'll join us on Thursday. If not, we'll see you on the trail.